pleasure. Please have a seat. Thank you. You see all of these people who are waiting to be with you today.
Hello, hello. Hello. Who are you people?
Let me tell you. Okay. I want to say hello to everybody, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm Terrie Rizzo, the chairwoman of the Florida Democratic Party, and I am super excited to be here today with a number of our fabulous Florida College Democrats. Our Florida College Dems are the absolute best, and I'm especially excited to be here with you today. We have leader Stacey Abrams to discuss the importance of the youth vote in Florida and the importance of on-campus locations, voting locations. A little bit of background, in 2018, almost 60,000 people voted at 12 college campuses, polling locations around Florida. Over half of those that voted on campus were under the age of 30. Shows the importance of that. Your vote will not just determine your future, but the future of America. When Florida's young people vote, Florida wins. So someone who's worked so hard on voting rights is with us today. Stacey Abrams is a New York Times best-selling author, entrepreneur, nonprofit CEO, and a political leader, as we know. After serving for 11 years in the Georgia House of Representatives, 7 as the minority leader, in 2018, she became the Democratic nominee for the governor of Florida. And she won Georgia.
I just don't want you to get in trouble.
Thank you very much.
I'm not moving yet.
I'm so used to saying governor of Florida.
I understand.
You got it. Well, she won more votes there than any other Democrat in the state's history. And she was the first black woman to become the gubernatorial nominee for a major party anywhere in the United States. After witnessing the gross mismanagement, as we know, of the 2018 election by that Secretary of State there, Stacey Abrams launched Fair Fight to ensure that every American has a voice in our election system. Fair Fight. Over the course of her career, Leader Abrams has founded multiple organizations devoted to voting rights, training and hiring young people of color, and tackling social issues on both the state and the national level. In 2019, she launched Fair Count to ensure accuracy in the 2020 census and greater participation in civic engagement, and the Southern Economic Advancement Project, a public policy initiative to broaden economic power and build equity in the South. She's a lifetime member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the 2012 recipient of the John F. Kennedy New Frontier Award, and a current member of the Board of Directors for the Center for American Progress. And here's something I bet you don't know. She's also written 8 romantic suspense novels.
What?
Oh, yeah? Under the pen name Selena Montgomery, in addition to Lead from the Outside, formerly Minority Leader, which is a guidebook on making real change. Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted, thrilled, and so happy to introduce to you Leader Stacey Abrams.
So I'm excited to be here. I've heard my voice a lot, so we're going to start directly with Q&A because you guys have things to ask and I have things to say. But the one request I would make is that when you ask a question or when you're making a comment, that you tell me who you are and why you're here. And do it out loud because I don't do telepathy.
Would it be good if I went around the room and introduced who they are? Would that be helpful? All right. We have with us our college students. We have Isali Ortiz from Barry University. We have Robert Cothran from Florida International University. We have Rachel Stempler from the University of Miami. Rachel. We have Michael Kester from the University of Central Florida. We have Gabby Miernik from Florida Atlantic University. And Zion, let me just add your last name. Tell your last name.
Zion Gates Norris from Florida Memorial University.
From Florida Memorial University. And anybody have a question or something to start out that you'd like to start with, Leader Abrams?
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Is it on? Okay. Hi. So, as we know, you graduated from Spelman College, HBCU in Atlanta, and I currently go to the only HBCU in South Florida, Florida Memorial University. What are some ways that we can get HBCU campuses activated for 2020?
Thank you. So first of all, I want to say again, thank you for having me. I started my voting rights activism at Spelman. I started a voter registration drive Even before I was old enough to vote, I'm probably the only person who turned 18 in college and got excited to go register, and nothing else. But for me, the issue of voter registration is the beginning of the conversation, because it's a conversation about power. People need to understand that in a democracy, the only real power the citizen has is the ability to vote. That's how you shift how democracy operates. And that real power only begins when you get registered to vote. Many of the issues that we deal with on HBCU campuses, the reason a lot of students choose HBCUs is that they're grappling with the issues of race and class, and they want to be centered in a place that excites them about who they are and what their potential is. One of the most effective ways to engage students is to connect that potential with the power that voting can provide. And so what I would say is, number one, make certain there's an active conversation about voting rights, not just electing people, because elections are just a part of it. Yes, we get to pick people to be in charge, but what's more important is we get to decide what they do. It's a job interview. That's what elections are. We are hiring people to serve us, and if they refuse to acknowledge their responsibility for service, we get to fire them in the next election. And I think reframing, especially at HBCUs, by connecting the dots between who's making choices in their communities and what role they can play in making those choices real is critical. But I think it's impossible to get people to invest and engage if we don't acknowledge the flaws, if we don't acknowledge the damage that many of us who attend HBCUs have seen in our communities, no matter how privileged we are. And part of our obligation, especially as folks who are receiving advanced education, is to be authentic about the concerns and to understand the levels of government that make decisions. The presidency is important, but it is not, in fact, it has the most remote responsibility for the lives people live. It is your city council member, your county commissioner, it's your governor and your state legislature. They decide most of the things that will either make your life better or make your life worse. And what we have often forgotten to do in our process is actually connect the dots by describing what those roles and responsibilities are. And so number one, register people to vote. Number two, educate them about what that vote can mean. That it's not just about whether you came within 25,000 votes of changing out the governor, is did you come within 10 votes of making sure that you had a school board that ensured that there was good funding in your school system? Did you have a mayor who was willing to stand up and say that stand your ground is wrong? So it's being willing to elect people that are closest to the people and hold them accountable for what is done. I like things in threes, so the third one is go get them and make them go vote. And that's why the early voting locations on college campuses is such a critical issue, because disproportionately Black and Latino voters vote disproportionately at early voting locations on college campuses. And so we need to ensure that Florida Memorial is not only a place where they're educating bright minds, but where people know that if they come there, their democracy is made more real.
What's next?
Yes.
First of all, Leader Abrams, the 47th President of the United States. Thank you so much for coming here, and it's a great honor to be part of this with you. As someone who grew up without many financial issues and is currently experiencing them due to medical emergencies and has been more open in terms of learning about the issues that my friends face in terms of struggling to get by financially. What are the best ways, as someone who only now is having to deal with that, what are the best ways to communicate that in terms of encouraging people to vote who are dealing with these issues from coming from a place of privilege?
Well, first of all, I'm sorry that you're facing these challenges. And the reality is no one should have to learn about economic hardship. No one should have to learn about economic struggle in a nation that is so blessed with resources. And the fact that you have come to this lesson at this stage in your life doesn't diminish the importance of it. It doesn't matter when harm hits you. Once it gets you, your responsibility is to navigate it. And there's no less authenticity to your story just because it happened after you had privilege. What we have to recognize is that there's no such thing as comparative misery, and there's no relative scale of loss, that people experience their lives as they are. And what those you reach out to want to hear is not that you came from a place of privilege before it happened, but that you understand that privilege is an advantage, but it's not a guarantee. And that what you want to offer to all, and the reason you're engaged in voting activities, is that you want to guarantee that no one else has to have this experience. Whether they come from privilege or have no idea what privilege looks like, there should be an equity in our system that says that your medical needs should be met in a nation that can solve these problems. But I think what's even more resonant is your willingness to admit that you didn't know, because so often we close ourselves off because we think ignorance is a sign of weakness. Ignorance is a sign of opportunity, because you can solve ignorance. You can cure ignorance with information. You can cure distance by closing the gap and having those conversations. And so I would say for you, your best lead is to share your story. Regardless of where we sit on the spectrum, I fundamentally believe that Americans care about each other. We have in recent days been taught to hide that concern behind polarization that is grounded ostensibly in politics, but really is a conversation about resources. Who has them, who doesn't, who's trying to take them, who should get them. But if you think about the moments when we as a nation rally together, it's because we care about each other and we care about this American experiment of shared values and shared resources. And you're a perfect example of that. And your willingness to take your own pain to turn it into opportunity for others. You don't ever want to say it that way because it sounds obnoxious, but I'll say it for you. But what you're willing to do is to not only try to solve your problem, but you want to help other people solve their problems, and that's what they want to know. Somebody else?
Who wants to go next? And I want you to state your name and your school.
My name is Michael Kester. I go to the University of Central Florida. Before I went to University of Central Florida, I got my associate's degree from Seminole State College, where I founded the College Democrats chapter there. And while I was president of that chapter, I worked with activists in the area to try and get an early voting location on that campus. We've tried a multitude of different things, contacting the supervisor of elections, going to board of trustees meetings, writing op-eds in the Orlando Sentinel. But at every step of the way, we've been met with just a brick wall of either Republican politicians, Republican bureaucracy, a board of trustees that is staffed almost completely by current and former Republican elected officials. What would your advice be for breaking through that wall? Because we talk to students, faculties all over the campus, and they're all for this, but we're met with these people in power that are putting roadblocks in our way.
Yeah. I mean, the unfortunate reality is that there is no easy fix to voter suppression. They don't want you to vote because they know if they let you vote, you won't vote for them. And again, we've got to keep coming back to, this is a power struggle. It's a power struggle that is grounded in not only the demographic changes that are happening around us, but there is a sea change in what we expect from leadership. The conversations we're having about gun safety, about climate change, about poverty and resources, about equity, those are issues that for so long have always been, but they never got traction, they never got attention. And those who do not want to solve those problems do not want to hear from you. The best way to undermine a system is to acknowledge what the constraints are, and then I believe in guerrilla warfare. That means that if you can't get them to add those locations, start going to people who would be unlikely allies, like the elderly who want to drive 2 miles instead of 10 miles. Find other communities that you may not see as having common cause with you, but who might be willing to work with you. When I was Democratic leader, one of my favorite examples of this was that I was part of what was called the Green Tea Party. I helped block anti-environmental legislation that was pushed by the Chamber of Commerce and the leadership of the Republican Party by getting folks from the Tea Party to vote with my caucus. We didn't have enough votes on our own to do anything, and it confused everyone that we talked to each other because we didn't agree on anything. But the issue was, I didn't try to convince them that they agreed with me because it was an issue of saving the environment. I talked to them about property values. They cared about the property values. And they cared about property values, we cared about dying, and so we were able to work together. And so what I'm saying is, you should look for uncommon allies who might be willing to stand with you. But the other piece is that sometimes we only get what we want by going outside of what we need. And that means possibly, renting vans and taking folks to the closest location to get those people out of office. Because they're not going to give you permission to take them out. You've got to take that permission and find your own way. And when I say take them out, I mean remove them from their elected offices. But you want to do the work of going, and sometimes it's going to be 2 or 3 cycles. But I would develop a plan for who's sitting in those seats, who's making those decisions, and how do you target them so that they no longer have the power they hold. It'll take some time. Look, I'm a black woman Democrat from the South. I believe in incrementalism. We're not going to get everything we want when we need it, and we're not going to get it when we deserve it. But we cannot let them push us back because they won't give us what we deserve. We just have to keep moving towards it. And we will get there, I believe in it.
Yeah, and early voting sites on college campuses are key.
Absolutely.
Rachel, you ready to go?
Hi, I'm Rachel from the University of Miami. So in my university, I see, of course, they're politically active and engaged students, but I do see that like the larger student body tends to view voting kind of as a chore. So how do you suggest changing like the narrative around voting as kind of using our voice and taking power back?
I believe fundamentally, especially on college campuses, when I ran for the Student Government Association the first time, I did not run on a platform of vision or greatness. I ran, and I kid you not, my sign said, LLC 1 has 2-ply toilet paper, everyone else has 1-ply toilet paper. And my mission was to agree that, I was gonna guarantee that every dorm had 2-ply toilet paper. It was the most reductive campaign slogan imaginable. But the reason I focused on that, I talked some other stuff too, but it was a question of equity. It was equity that was raised in a way that really resonated with people. And so sometimes, especially on college campuses, we are thinking about this broad notion of what democracy is, but people want to know what changes in my life if I do this? What's the thing that causes me harm that can be made better if I get this? That's what you want to talk about, because for most people, they don't care about the fights between parties. They care about their lives. And what I have found to be the most effective way to cut through what is termed as voter apathy, but typically is actually voter disillusionment, is that you've got to remind them of what it is they want. Most of us are comfortable. We may not be happy, we may have to struggle, but there's a certain degree of complacency that things aren't as bad as they could be. We want people to start thinking about how things could be better, but you've got to connect the dots. And so I would think about what are the things that cause tension. I promise you there's something that happens at the University of Miami that annoys a lot of people. And so figure out what those things are, and don't just say this is the problem, then be able to connect the dot to who can fix the problem. Because people vote when they can get something or when they want to stop something. And you saw this happen in 2018. Yes, there were challenges with your statewide elections, but Amendment 4 is proof that you all will stand up when you believe something needs to be fixed. And it's because of the outsized participation that you all had that with that 60,000 votes on those early college on college campuses, that changed the future of the state. Find that thing and make that the piece, and find 3 or 4 of them, because it's not going to be the same for everyone, but find the piece that can ignite them, not to suddenly embrace voting as it's good, but as something that can make their lives better.
Do we have time for one more, or do we need to wrap? One more time? Okay, who hasn't gone? Gabby?
Well, I want to make sure both of you, so I promise my answers will be shorter.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Gabby Miernik, and I'm the Director of Communications for the Florida College Democrats, but I go to Florida Atlantic University. So my university was one of the 12 that had a polling location since, I believe, 2018. But since then, we have had trouble with the Republican leadership within the state trying to take away that right, and even within our own community, having a large amount of turnout to justify, I guess, keeping the location. What tips or advice could you give me or other people within my community to be able to try to fight to keep this location and show that it is vital to our campus and the community around it?
Certainly. So I sit on the board of Priority. So we are helping finance the litigation to undo this non-permitted parking place lie. I mean, essentially it is a gimmick that is being thrown out to justify stopping you from doing what you accomplished, which is changing the narrative in Florida. And they know how narrow the elections are. Every moment of suppression makes it easier to keep power. But often we think that because we talk about it a lot that people understand it. And I would think about how deep into the understanding of most community members is this recognition. I know college, we think because we talk about it that everyone is hearing it, but I would over communicate this. Make sure every student gets frustrated and annoyed because they don't want to hear about this again. Because once that starts to happen, once you have that saturation, then you start to get more action. But this is also something that's going to have to be done through the legal system as well. We need you fighting, but we're going to have to fight on multiple fronts because they know that if this goes through, if we can restore to Florida college campuses the authority to hold those early voting locations, the outcome of 2020 belongs to Democrats in Florida. Yeah. They know that's true. And so we have to make them work to fight, to keep it. That means fighting the legal side, fighting the legislative side, but fighting the advocacy side. And what you can do most effectively, don't just think about the people who know you, think about every student in this state. Because even if they don't get it for themselves, they need to know they should be fighting for it because they're fighting for it for everyone. You get the last question, you said profound and transformative, and I should only have to say 3 words to answer. Go.
So my name is Isali.
See, you're just starting off.
My name is Isali. I go to Barry University. So my question is about how to engage. I'm Puerto Rican, and obviously with all the natural disasters that have been occurring, we're seeing an influx of Puerto Rican students at our universities. So I guess my question is how to engage the Puerto Rican community and minorities in general at schools like mine where a lot of people aren't willing to get involved because the administrations aren't made up of people of color. And since, we don't feel like we're heard in our university, a lot of people don't want to, go out and vote because it's kind of a similar thing. We're not seeing our, people who look like us and represent us in places of power, so that kind of deters people from voting. So I guess my question is, how can we combat that and get people to turn out to vote?
So how do we fix America? Gotcha. And I appreciate that question. Look, in Georgia, we increased Latino participation for Democrats by 3x. We increased AAPI participation. We increased Black participation. We increased youth participation rates by 139%. But the way we were able to do this was by recognizing that these are communities that feel unseen and unheard, and they're not wrong. The beginning of change is acknowledging what's wrong and who is at fault. Sometimes it's the Republicans, but often it's complacency within our own communities. We think that because we feel it, everyone who shares our experience and our characteristics feel it. And they do, but they don't always know what to do about it. So one thing we did in our campaign, when we first went out to start recruiting and cultivating voters, we didn't talk about me. We talked about them. We asked people what they needed, what their issues were, and this kind of goes back to all these pieces. We have to begin with voters where they are, not where we want them to be. We want them to be energized and angry and ready to go. Most people are tired and overwhelmed, and they believe this is all there is. They don't see people who look like them, so they assume no one can be. I appreciate the applause I get when people say I'm the first Black woman to be the gubernatorial nominee for a major party. It is a sad reality that in 2018, I was the only Black woman to ever get that far.
Yes.
And as much as I appreciate the celebration, it is an indictment of our system that it took that long and it still didn't work. And so what I would say for you and for all of you, people want to be seen, they want to be heard, and they want to see investment. And the reason I'm so excited that we're having this conversation today is that typically this conversation happens in September, right before the election. What every single one of you represent is a year out. We are already at work. And the best way to convince those communities to be engaged is to remind them of how bad it's been and tell them it can get worse if they stay silent. It can get better if they engage. Because the worst case scenario is you engage, you don't get as far as you want, but you're further ahead than you were before. I'm the best loser I know. I did not get the thing I sought, but as a result, I got further and our communities made it further. People have to talk to us. They have to engage us. That's what we want. We want ultimate victory, but we've got to remember that victory takes steps, and that sometimes what looks like a win to us looks like failure to them. They're not the point. And you are the perfect person to tell your community and to help engage communities. Ask what people need, be authentic about what they can have, and do the investment of your time, your talent, and your treasure to move the scales forward every time. Because ultimately, we're going to be victorious. It's just a question of when, not a question of if. Thank you all.
That's a great way to finish. I want to thank all our college Democrats
all my
for
fault, I know.
participating in this, and thank you, Leader Abrams. You are an inspiration. Your work is transformative, and the Florida Democratic Party is really proud to be partners with you and verified in this fight.
We are.
Yeah.
We're happy to be here.
That's right.
And I
And
expect to see you
starting
guys
a year
again.
out. Starting a year out and going forward. So thank you. And